Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into some of the most popular cultural myths and debunking them. You know, those stories we hear growing up, the ones that get passed down as historical fact. Turns out, a lot of them are about as real as a unicorn riding a roller coaster. We're talking about those myths that are so ingrained in our culture, we accept them without question. But should we? Are we letting ourselves be blinded by nostalgia and tradition? Get ready to have your mind blown, because we're about to separate fact from fiction. Let's get started. Okay, let's talk about George Washington, the OG president, the face on the dollar bill, the guy who supposedly had teeth made of wood. This story has been passed down through generations, becoming one of those quirky historical facts that everyone seems to know. But how much of it is actually true? Except plot twist, he didn't. That's right, George Washington never had wooden teeth. It's one of those myths that has somehow managed to stick around despite being completely false. You see, contrary to popular belief, Washington's dentures weren't carved from some cherry tree he couldn't tell a lie about chopping down. The reality is far more complex and, frankly, a bit more unsettling. We have this image of him as a folksy dude with a mouth full of splinters, but the truth is way more interesting. Imagine the ingenuity and craftsmanship that went into making dentures in the 18th century. His dentures were actually a feat of 18th century engineering, crafted from a rather unsettling mix of human teeth, animal teeth, and ivory. These materials were chosen for their durability and resemblance to natural teeth, even though the end result was far from perfect. Yeah, you heard that right. Human teeth. It's a little creepy to think about, but back then it was a common practice. People would sell their teeth to dentists, who would then use them to create dentures for the wealthy. So where did the whole wood thing come from? It's a question that has puzzled historians for years. The answer lies in the materials used and how they aged over time. Well, the materials used to make his dentures would stain over time, giving them a wood-like appearance. The ivory and other components would darken, leading people to believe they were made of wood. And thus, a myth was born. It's fascinating how a simple misunderstanding can evolve into a widely accepted fact. So next time you hear someone mention George Washington's wooden teeth, you can set the record straight with the real story. Let's journey back to the days of early America, a time when the New World was still a wild frontier, and European settlers were just beginning to establish their foothold. The landscape was vastly different from what we know today, teeming with dense forests, untamed rivers, and the rich cultures of Native American tribes. Among these early settlers was a young Native American woman named Pocahontas, who has become a legendary figure in American history. According to popular lore, she saved the life of Captain John Smith, a leader of the Jamestown colony, in a dramatic act of bravery. The story goes that Pocahontas and John Smith fell madly in love, creating a romantic narrative that has been passed down through generations. Romantic, right? Except, it's probably a big fat fabrication. First of all, Pocahontas was around 12 years old when she met Smith. Let that sink in for a minute. She was just a child, not the young woman often depicted in stories and movies. Second, there's zero credible evidence of any romantic relationship between them. Smith was a known embellisher, prone to exaggerating his tales of adventure. He often portrayed himself as a heroic figure, and the story of Pocahontas saving his life fits perfectly into his pattern of self-aggrandizement. Some historians even believe he completely made up the whole Pocahontas saving my life story to boost his own image. They argue that Smith's accounts were written years after the events supposedly took place, and there are inconsistencies in his stories. It's more likely their relationship was one of political convenience, not a Disney romance. Pocahontas played a significant role in the interactions between the Native Americans and the English settlers, often acting as a mediator and symbol of peace. The real Pocahontas was a complex historical figure, and her story deserves more than a whitewashed fairy tale. She was a bridge between two cultures, a young woman who navigated the turbulent waters of early American history with grace and intelligence. Her legacy is far richer and more nuanced than the simplistic love story often told. Every year on March 17th, the world turns green to celebrate St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland, who famously drove all the snakes out of the Emerald Isle. This tale has been passed down through generations, painting St. Patrick as a heroic figure who rid the land of these slithering creatures. Except he wasn't Irish, and there were never any snakes in Ireland to begin with. The island's cold climate and isolation from the mainland made it an unsuitable habitat for snakes. Yeah, you heard that right. The story of St. Patrick driving out snakes is more myth than reality. St. Patrick wasn't even born in Ireland. He was actually born in Roman Britain, in a place that is now part of modern-day England or Wales. He was brought to Ireland as a slave when he was just a teenager. Captured by Irish pirates, he spent 6 years in captivity before escaping back to his homeland. And the snakes? Well, Ireland, being an island, never had any snakes to drive out. The absence of snakes is due to its geographical isolation. The story is likely an allegory, with the snakes representing paganism, which St. Patrick helped to convert people from. His mission was to spread Christianity and convert the Irish pagans. So while the image of St. Patrick as a snake-banishing superhero is entertaining, the truth is a bit more nuanced. His real legacy lies in his role in bringing Christianity to Ireland, a feat that has had a lasting impact on the country's culture and history. Remember that heartwarming story about a young George Washington chopping down his father's cherry tree and then confessing because he couldn't tell a lie? Yeah, that never happened. Turns out, this tale is about as real as a pet dragon. It was completely made up by one of Washington's early biographers, Mason Locke Weems, who was basically trying to create a superhero myth around the first president. Weems was more interested in crafting a compelling narrative than sticking to the truth. He wanted to present Washington as a virtuous role model, even if it meant stretching the truth. A lot. The cherry tree anecdote, while a nice story, is a prime example of how easily historical myths can take root and spread. Thanks for watching! We've just scratched the surface of the many cultural myths out there. It's amazing how these stories, despite being untrue, can still hold so much power and influence. But by examining them critically, by questioning what we think we know, we can gain a deeper understanding of history and culture. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more myth-busting content. See you next time.